Egypt. No nation in the world has been debated as much as she has. Her dates, her language, her secrets, her people. But it's the history which has caused the most curiosity among scholars and visitors alike. This is my 5th time in Egypt, and I firmly believe to understand what Africans did on the Nile all those years ago, one must not just read about it, but be here to experience it. I'm excited to be going deeper and deeper along the Nile into Africa.
Rasta never die.
Aswan is the heartland of Nubia, and was once the capital of the Kushite empires, which is where Kemet's true origins are found.
Onuora. From where?
Nigeria.
Nigeria?
Yeah.
Okay.
When I look at him, he looks African. He's African. What does Egyptian look like?
Her ancient monuments seem like a spirit from Egypt's glorious past. In all, 32 dynasties rule these lands over thousands of years. This land has been called by many names, but the name the progenitors of this part of the Nile once called it was Kemet, the land of the blacks.
Yes. Good evening. For those of you who are going to be watching or listening rather on podcasts, Apple Podcasts, what do they call the other one again? Spotify. You'll be able to check. That's the trailer from my newest. Kofi, should I say our newest?
I think this is your no. Listen, this is you, man. This is all you.
A little bit of But yeah, okay. Well, the latest documentary on Egypt, which I'm very excited to show you. So that was the trailer. Thank you. But anyway, we are back, Kofi. We're actually back. This seems in a way like a second season. We've been gone that long, my brother. It's been at least 6 months, right? I think. Yeah. At
I don't think it was 6 months. I think it was maybe 4 months. Because of,
we haven't done one this year.
Are you sure? Oh wow.
My brother, okay. I don't think we've done one this year. So this is clearly like 6 months. This is like a new season. And we finally have a title, Kofi. It's called Men Talk 2. Men Talk 2. In other words, like all the time you see like women talking about all this type of stuff, and then like it's just nice. Guys also talk. Need to talk. So me and you are talking.
Let's talk, man. Let's talk. What's on the agenda? What's on the agenda, my brother?
So the agenda today, Kofi, is Hedy. Wait, hold on. Where are our names? We don't have names today. Anyway, it doesn't really matter, does it? No, not really.
No, not really.
But today we are going to be talking about living in the West and how, in my opinion, it's not becoming as popular as it used to be. And I had a couple of talking points that I wanted to bring up because like the one thing is our father's generation. Our fathers grew up. Kofi, what year was your dad born? Like what year? Rest his soul.
Good question. Is it
what period?
He died in 78, and that was what?
7 years ago. 7 years ago, right? 6 years ago.
It can be, six actually.
No, it's 6 years. 17, right?
Yeah, it was
17, right?
Oh wow.
Okay, so he would have been.
I was thinking 4 years. It was actually 6 years. You're correct.
Yeah, I remember I was in Burkina when you were going for the funeral. I think.
Yeah. So what's that? That's 1939, 1940.
Yeah. So he's I guess 4 years younger than my father. Yeah. Okay. So they were born in the 30s. Let's just say that.
Mm.
So those men that were born in the 30s, they saw Europeans, in particular British people, and the educational system that they brought as superior. Because let's face it, at that time in Africa,
It was.
we
Yeah.
weren't really practicing that sort of westernized education. So it was the favorable thing for them to do, which is to aspire to be English. Of course, it's colonial times and so on. And of course, for them and their offspring, the height of education was to come to England. But like in my dad's case, and I think your dad's case too, they came to England, and the plan was never to stay.
Mhm.
It was never to stay here. It was never to jackpot, as we say in Nigeria. It was never to leave and not come back. It was always about go get my education, come back and build my country.
Yeah.
But something happened because by the time it gets to our generation, the generation that was born, let's just say from the 70s to the 90s, maybe even to the 2000s, even till now, actually, it's become so much about just leaving. Just leaving. And so in our case, Kofi, by the time you and I went to boarding school in Africa, secondary school, and by the time we finished secondary school, the plan was to come to the UK, finish our education, university, maybe work for a few years, and then go back. But actually, I would say from our school, most people went back. I'd say probably like 60% of the people went back. I think maybe 50%.
I would disagree with that. I think those with
I think the
with
Muslims,
something to
I think a
go
lot of
back
the
to,
Muslim, I think a lot of the Muslim
yeah,
guys went back. A lot of
yeah.
the Muslim guys went back.
But then if you look at I guess the background of those people, not from a sort of religious standpoint, but just economically, there's a difference between those that went back and those that stayed. Those that went back were almost sorted in a way,
Yeah,
job
yeah,
wise
but
and things like that.
you know what's so funny though? I think we're quite fortunate too. I think there are levels to it, but I think the ones that went back are from it was mostly Hausa speaking people, like you said, people who are wealthier. They went back, but I think it's like 50% of the people went back. I think so. I think if you analyze it, like 50
Okay.
eventually
I
went
would
back.
say it's less. I would say it's about 35 at most, because there's
Okay,
lots of people still living in the diaspora.
okay, let's give it
Loads.
40%. But anyway, like 40% of the people went back, which isn't bad.
Mm.
Fast forward to the current state that we have in Africa now, West Africa, Ghana to Nigeria. You have people who are in fact, I told this story. I was in an Uber one time in Nigeria, and the guy had a Canadian flag in his the wing mirror.
On the
I
dashboard.
said,
Oh, okay.
yeah, what's going on? You from Canada? It's like, no, it's my prayer points. In other words, he's praying for that God will give him an opportunity to go to Canada. So people are trying to, every single day, everybody's running to try and get to Europe. So the question is, what has happened in that not short space of time, it's like 50 years. In that 50-year span that has led us to start thinking, that has allowed us to start thinking of coming to Europe.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I think we should bring that up, and then we should go from there. Modine,
Okay.
West Diamond, good to see you. So Kofi,
So-
give me your input.
Okay. So on this particular point, so what you said about our parents coming here with a plan to go back, I think that is absolutely correct. Like using my dad as an example, he came spent about 20 odd years.
20.
And literally, yeah, at 20, maybe a bit less, but definitely double digits. And literally, the moment this guy left these shores, he never set foot here again. It's almost like he said, I came to do what I needed to do. I am done.
Yeah.
And he went back. And as you said, the plan was always to go back and build back home. So he came here, qualified. Bear in mind, his dad was a farmer, basically. So he didn't come here on any, it was hustling, cleaning, all of those things, but got himself chartered status, got experience here, and then immediately went back, set up his own practice, and started practicing in Ghana. Now, as to your question as what where the shift is, in my opinion, I think it's a couple of things. One, I think our parents' time, they had a stronger link with back home, with being back home, because they came when they were like full grown adults. So for all intents and purposes, they here was almost like being away from home. Home was home. So the whole aim was to go back home. Whereas I think with us,
I think even
because we came at such a young age, like we've literally built our lives here. Our whole adulthood is here. You know, our connections, our relationships, our groups are predominantly here. So it's a harder thing to sort of go back ultimately. But I mean, we still plan to go back. That's
also
not,
I think the racism and the political climate at the time made it was more conducive for them to go back home, and was less there was less incentive for them to want to stay here in like the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s, right? Because it's a little bit more, it wasn't like it is now.
True. And also I think I guess to a certain extent, it's also easier to go back home because back then, remember the immigration status, like
True.
traveling and stuff was very easy.
It was
So
easier.
you could, yeah. So you could go come back. So there was no pressure to stay here because here now people are hustling. They have to stay here 10 years before they, just to try and get papers. So
passport. Yeah.
that plays into it as well. And also, I think, and again, this is more of a theory. It's my opinion, but it's more of a theory than because I haven't been in it. Let me say it and then we can discuss it. So I think in a weird way, the economic climate, although we're still quite, a developing country back then, I think the economic climate and the opportunities back home at that time was very obvious, was very clear. And people that had certain skills, it was very sort of like almost incumbent on them to go back and exploit that.
Yeah.
Because as you said, the standard, the barometer back home at that point was to get that Western education. Once you had it, you're almost in touch with
the qualification, yeah.
The qualification, yeah. Because when I look at my family, for example, those that went back, including my dad, were those that were sort of professionally qualified in a certain field. But I guess if you didn't have that, then here was a bit more appealing because here you could almost, do your, regular 9 to 5 and be able to have a decent way of life. Whereas back home, it's not as easy in that regard.
Yeah.
So I think the economic side also played a big part. Actually, so I'm just trying to think of like my father's siblings. So there's about 12 of them.
12.
Actually, not a lot went back. I think it was only 2 of them. My dad and I think one of my uncles, but even went much later. So majority of them actually stayed here.
But they were younger than him, though. They would have come later, right?
They did, yeah. So they did come later.
Been sucked up in that whole like coups, military coups, financial, economic problems, right?
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. But yeah, I think that's it. And I think now, I mean, why are we not going back? I think because as we both know, we both are desperate to go back. But again, life back home, unless you have the right, circumstances, it's rough. There's no like in between. It's either it's rough or it's good. Yeah. There's no in between, and so you need to make sure that you get the right opportunity, the right place. So this is what me and my wife are always talking about, trying to find the right opportunity to allow us to go home. But hands down, and again we'll get into it later on. When it's good, the quality of life is.
But do you think that that's something that's come with age for you? I know to be fair, for you've always sort of talked about going back home, and but like, do you think that's something that, generally speaking, for most people, do you think that's something that comes up more the older you get?
I think it's inevitable.
Yeah, you think so?
I think it's absolutely inevitable because as you get older, as you start to or think about building a family, those kind of things sort of become more pertinent.
Yeah.
So like, obviously when I was in my teens or when I was at uni or just graduated uni, although I had the long-term goal of going back, in that moment, say within my 20s, the intention was not to go back during that time. It never was. I mean, partly because he wasn't trying to get the experience here, but I think age plays a big part in it.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking for me, okay, where can I have the best quality of life for me and my family? Also, in terms of my kids growing up, how do I want them to grow up? And as you're well aware, you've got 3 kids, so you know this even more than I do, is those initial sort of, I guess, 18 years, I would say probably even less, but let's say 18 years for simplicity, 16, 18 years. That's the key part of their development. If they're brought up back home with the values that we have back home, they can go wherever they want. They can go to Antarctica for all you care. Those things are instilled within them, and always, no matter what, they will know where home is. They might make a life for themselves somewhere, but because they've grown up back, in Ghana or Nigeria, wherever, that will always be home to them as well.
Yeah,
and that will always sort of be within them.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's funny. It's funny when we talk about it, because, like, for me, I think like we were saying, both our fathers of that era, the expectation for them was, okay, our children will go abroad and come back and take over. But there's this brain drain period in the 1980s, 90s till now, where a whole bunch of African people just moved to UK, moved to America, moved to all these different places. And I suppose for them, their expectations for their children changed. So people who were like, maybe people who are in their 50s, 60s now, as opposed to our fathers who are in their 80s. People who are in their 50s, 60s now, their children, they brought their children here to have a better life here, as opposed to our parents, where the plan was. And I think that's a class thing too. Like, our parents, there was a class, like, we're not, we're not like lower end. Like, our parents were, in decent positions because they studied abroad and so on. But people who have a lesser economic, maybe not even that lesser, but lesser economic status, for them it's harder because it's like, okay, even middle class, like, say my wife, for instance, like, her parents were doing pretty well in Nigeria, but they could see the situation getting worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
And they were just like, you know what, sod this, let me come to the UK. And it's not as if they came and did menial jobs. They came and they were professionals. Some were doctors, lawyers, and so on, right? But I think they started to see that things were different. Their expectations for their children changed. And that's really been the way that the expectation for most people's children. Most people, I was in Cannes last month, and I ran into a guy, I won't even say his name because everybody would know him. He's like runs one of the biggest like movie companies in Nigeria. Okay. Let's just say Nigeria. And like, after a while, he was just like, I was like, oh, how's your family and everything? Like, they're doing well back home and everything. He's like, man, my wife and my kids, they moved over. They're here. Another guy who, I lived with for about 3 months in Niger as well. He's like, yeah, the Shell guy, he worked in petroleum, moved all his kids over to the UK. So I'm like, what? That's crazy. So we're starting to see this whole thing where, for a better life, people are still bringing their children over. For me, the question is this, though. The way society is changing in the West. Not to say that our parents didn't have their own burdens back then. There was like racism, whatever, right? But now, when you look at the way society is changing so quickly, and then at the same time, you start to see like this whole rise in this kind of like African mentality that Black people around the world are starting to have, plus the rise of the Arabic speaking countries. Like, you start to check yourself and be like, is the West really the best place ultimately? And this is why I wanted us to have this conversation, because I'm like, if you had the option to live anywhere else in the world other than Europe, where do you think would be your number one place?
That's a good question.
Anywhere else
other than Europe. I mean, it'll be back home for sure. Unless if we're taking that off the sort of table.
Because I'm talking of not in a hypothetical sense. I'm talking of, okay, you can go anywhere tomorrow. Like, based on the circumstances, you have to leave the UK. Where do you go tomorrow?
I'd go back home.
I'll
definitely go back either back home, or if Ghana is out of it, it'll probably be somewhere on the continent though. Maybe I don't know, Kenya, SA, maybe not SA, maybe Cape Town.
Let me ask the question a different way.
Yeah.
With your qualifications and experience,
Yeah.
which sort of part of the world can you move to now where you will get a slightly better culture, way of life, better societal, like less societal drama with all this cis women and men bullshit.
Yeah.
Excuse my French. Where can you go? And then with your qualifications that you're able to get those transferable skills, giving you a similar salary.
Yeah.
So, because Ghana, you can't really get it. On the continent, you will have to do quite a few interviews.
Well, the thing is, you can get in Ghana, but the roles are very few and far between. That's the dream. That's why I'm still here. But you're right; they're not as prevalent as they used to be once upon a time. But I get that where you're driving at. I think because in fact, actually, when we met yesterday, prior to you guys joining us, I was chatting to Kano about this, and we're actually talking about the Middle East.
Yeah.
So we're talking about Saudi Arabia, Dubai, how like they're very keen on people with UK experience tax wise because they've introduced corporate tax and things like that on their end, and they obviously they pay well, if not commensurate to here even more. Plus there's no income tax, so it's even better. So so we're discussing that. So based on your question in terms of where can I almost find somewhere a job where it's similar to here with a better lifestyle almost immediately. It'll probably Middle East. East.
And yeah, obviously I was driving towards it, but I also think that the Middle East conversation is very and I hate using that phrase Middle East, but anyway, that area of the world is becoming very, very like prominent for numerous reasons. I also think, and I've said this so many times, that the world's power is gradually shifting in that direction. That part of the world. The West is declining in so many different ways, it's almost unbelievable. I think in terms of you look at things that the West was better at 50 years ago in terms of academics, the academic standards of its students. You look at even just basic things like the spoken English, the quality, the standard of education, the standard of discipline. I always joke with you about this. I'm like, how are these the people that colonized us? I said, if it was these people here that are around now that you see every day that colonized us, I said, there's no way. We would have turned around and colonized them. So when you watch UK Border Force, you see a Nigerian guy saying, I'm 15 years old. I'm 15 when he looks like a grown man. And then he's managing to lie to a woman to convince her to keep him in the country. These people, their standards are just somewhere else right now. Right? Okay. So in my head, I'm thinking, how is it that, like with all these societal problems, it's just a matter of time that the UK and the Western countries in general will be further down the pecking order, and the power will be like in China, Qatar, UAE, and so on.
Can I ask you something?
Go on.
So this is along the lines of the devil, in a sense.
Yeah.
Now let's play out your theory. Let's say the power does transfer. No. It's a question to you. So imagine the power that's just transferred to the BRIC nations, for example.
Yeah.
In the Middle East and stuff like that. Do you think that would be better in all sense of the word than the last sort of 100 years where the West of it essentially had the power?
But then I think the bigger question is, in the last 100 years when the Western world, or last 300 years that the Western world has run it, how good has life been for everybody else? Pretty bad. Pretty great. Last 300. Don't focus on just like 50 years. Focus on the 200.
No, but we can't do 300 because that's like
dominated for 300 years.
Yes, but we can. Okay, let's narrow it down a bit because
we can't now.
No, we have to, because listen, we're not talking about an age where like we were still using. I don't know. Like let's talk about the developed world when their world became.
I mean, I go from like industrial revolution, at least 200 years. You have to say, like really, that's really what we have to start talking about industrial level. So 200 years is when they've been running stuff. Is no even. I would
think life hasn't improved in 200 years.
But life has improved. Life has improved, but their sense of fairness has not. You see, the sense of fairness for the elites has never changed. It's always been the same. It's and I think, especially when you start talking about, like, let's talk specifically about us African people. African people, and I say this all the time, it doesn't matter where you go, whether it's a communist country, Muslim country, this country, whatever country. African people who are blacks are at the bottom of everything. Just because we have one or two, you're, for instance, a tokenistic black person in the UK. If you go and take the average earning power of a black person who holds a British passport in this country, you are elite. You understand? That's just the fact. So you're an outlier, if that's the correct use of the term. You're not even part of the norm. You go to you look at who is dying in the Mediterranean. It's not as if they're the only ones that are coming in, but those are the ones that are left to die in Italy. I'm writing a movie about it, for God's sake. So I've researched it a lot. Syrians come in. People who are not black but coming from poorer countries are still coming in. They don't get treated the same as us. So the point I'm making is, what the Western world has done to us, it's fine to say better the devil you know than the one that you don't know. But the reality is the one that we know is bad and will never change. It has never changed.
And okay, so I guess what convinces you? No, that's fine. I will agree with you on that point. But I guess, what do you see about the other emerging powers that you think will change that dynamic?
Well, I would say this though. I think you have to go by which part of the world has more. And by the way, I'm not advocating for anything. I'm just looking at how.
No, of course, we're just talking.
Because unfortunately, throughout history, this is it's only these flies are just all over. Throughout history, it's the time that it's only the time when the West has been in complete power that we've seen an extremism of racial division. There's no time in history that is this much racial division. You take the time of the Romans, they didn't do any, it was never about race. It might have been about different groups here and there, but it was never about race. You go to the time of the Greeks, to an extent, it was never really about race either. Time of the Egyptians, whatever, and so on. I'm now talking history. But it's only the time that the Europeans have been in control, Europeans and the Westernized people have been in control, that we've seen this extremity of like racial issues. So my thing is, now that power seems like it's shifting not just to the Middle East, but to China as well, and India, right? Places which have their own problems, don't get it twisted. But now that power is shifting in those places, first of all, I think it's inevitable. I don't think that we will be able to do anything, because no one place has ever held power completely throughout human history. So power will naturally shift, and I think ultimately power will also shift back to Africa at some point. Maybe not in our lifetime, but certainly, it's in the future. It's coming. But I think power is going to shift east. I think Africa is getting its act together. But I'm just saying, for now, the one place that I would consider, the only reason why I would consider places like the Middle East in particular, is when you look from a religious point of view, and I'm no advocate for Islam, I'm not a Muslim or anything like that, but the only sort of religious form that you can look at now in the world that still sticks to its principles is Islam. If you really, really analyze it, Christianity means everyone's a Christian. They wear a rainbow flag and be a Christian. They will go and wear half naked, have kids out of wedlock, and it's still a Christian. Islam is still the only kind of like of the Abrahamic religions, and maybe the Hasidic Jews, but they're not that many, where people really, really look at each other fraternalistically, like they hold on to each other. Yes, again, I'm not saying that they are jihadis and everything. I'm talking just in general. I told this story about when I went to Mali. I've never seen, Mali is like it was under chaos at the time, but my brother, I've never seen people respect the rules. I'm in the middle of Timbuktu in the desert. The guy shoots me, this guy. They can shoot me and leave me and bury me in the desert. Nobody will know. But I'm giving these people bribe, and they're like, I don't take bribe. You have to understand what that means. This is Mali's one, I think, like certainly in Africa, it was like second or third poorest country in Africa at the time, and clearly top 5 in the world. These people are like, I will not take a bribe. You know, they see me as a fellow African person. I got invited to eat in people's houses, 3 different people's houses for lunch in one afternoon in Timbuktu. I saw it practiced, and it's not just there. When I'm in Egypt, when I'm in Morocco, just because I speak a little bit of Arabic, just a little bit, when I speak a little bit of Arabic to people in in the so-called Middle East Arabic states, the friendliness that they show to me is completely different. Now, it's not just about that. It's also about, okay, where is the Christian world? Because remember, the bastion of the Christian world, reason why we are Christians in Africa, 50% of Africa is now Christian, apparently. The reason why that is because of Europe. It's not because of anywhere else. But that place that taught us Christianity, what is the state of their countries? Morally speaking. So me, I'm looking at it like I'm looking at the educational system. I'm looking at the society in general. How a boy is not even a boy, a girl. You know, I'm looking at what the curriculum that they're giving to our children. I'm looking at even just simple things like there is no place. You saying you want to go and even pray, if you're a Christian, is seen as somehow bigoted. Then you say to yourself, "Hey, so this place, they don't believe in anything really, because anything goes." And anywhere that doesn't have some type of moral compass, you know, because whether it's communism, you could go to Russia in Soviet Union in the 1980s, and you know this is what they do. You just notice whether it's good or bad, you just notice what they do. When you come here, it's like anything goes. And that is not good for a society, because people who already have no leadership, you look at how many prime ministers they've changed over the last 5 years. People who have no discipline, you look at the school system, you look at the state of the police, it ends up just destroying your society. That's the model for ancient Rome. The corruption was so much, the immorality was so much, these people just ended up destroying themselves from within. So to me, the reason why I say look at the Middle East is because at the very least, they still hold on to the principles of morality. Morality. I'm not talking about you must believe in Islam or anything. I'm just saying purely on a moral. They are the people that say no, you can't access adult material in your hotel room. Women, as much as you don't like it, be modest, right? No public displays of affection, okay, right? You know, the family is. You've been to Dubai. There are whole trains they're train in the underground. There are train carriages dedicated to just women and children. I remember one day we had to catch a bus somewhere in Dubai. They came and kicked us. They kicked everybody out the way so my wife could come through. She wasn't pregnant or anything like that. Where in London, Paris, New York, wherever, you will see an old woman standing on a bus, standing on a train, and no one will move. I watched a video a few minutes ago on TikTok. These two policemen had asked these boys very politely, please step out of the car. We just need to perform a check. Now, fine, we know police brutality, but we also know I've been a teacher for 15 years in this country. I know how bad these kids are and how indisciplined they are. Policeman is being friendly. Get out the car. These boys are refusing, cussing out the policeman. And I'm like, you're a policeman. You won't even take you're taking it. Did you see the video of the guy who shot the policeman when he was in custody here in this country?
What?
They didn't because I think he protested about being searched. So they didn't search him, took him all the way to the police station. Literally didn't know that he had a gun on him. He shot the sergeant in the police station.
In this country?
In this country. So anyway, the point I'm making in general is, as much as we may criticize, and really the criticism that's leveled at Middle East, places like China, is really because they're the only people that are sticking to a creed. You see, we believe that the freedoms, the values of the West, in other words, from the free market in terms of economics, all the way down to the freedom of choice. You can do and say whatever you want. We believe that those principles are so important for a society. Now, granted, but when does it stop?
When does it diminish? Diminishing returns.
No. When does it stop? You see, we can all be free to do everything. But at some point, somebody has to go and put the light switch on. Somebody has to say, okay, this is a male toilet, this is a female toilet. Somebody has to say, okay, there's it is not the purge, my brother, because that's where we're leading to. If everyone is free to do whatever they want, then surely, you have like from the point where people can go and commit heinous crimes and go and plead insanity. This is the league. Whereas in other parts of the world, just like how we used to practice things, maybe you could call it when we were more primitive. You commit a crime, you are repaid for that crime, whether it's death penalty. you understand what I'm saying?
So you're repaid.
Whether you are castrated. You understand what I'm saying? So I'm just saying, it's obvious power is shifting in that direction because it's going into a direction where people hold values as sacrosanct, human values that we all at some point feel. So that's just what I wanted to bring up. I see my people in here. Galactic Soul is Z. How you doing? Long time. It's okay. I mean, I don't know if you want to come back with that. That's the only reason why I'm saying, like, in this direction, the direction that we're in right now, the direction that we're going to in the West, where it's every single day there's a new conversation about something new that challenges every person's belief, even just 10 years ago. 10 years ago, there was no debate about male or female. 10 years ago, there was no gay marriage. Yes, they were leading up to it. But now you're almost saying that everything that the world has accepted for thousands of years, let's rewrite it. We know better than every period. Every human being that's ever walked this earth, we know better than them. And that's where, for me, I just start saying it's pretty obvious why the West is declining. Because they're not sticking to any one principle. You understand?
Well, I mean, they are very well sticking to the freedom principle, depending on which side you're looking at. So I get your point, and for the most part, I do agree with your point. But let me just be the devil's advocate here. So, freedom of choice, it's almost a slippery slope. Freedom in general is a slippery slope because once you can't give partial freedom, you're either free or you're not. Right? You can't sort of mix and match it. And as you said, once
I
you
would
are
actually
free,
argue that there's no way it's free.
Okay,
but
technically you're probably right, but you know what I mean. When in reality, there's a certain level of freedom we accept that okay, this is freedom for us, as we have in the West. Now, the difficulty with that is once you give freedom, you can't try and manage the freedom to fit what you think is ideal. Exactly. You have to almost let it go. Exactly. And I think that's where we are in the West in that regard. Now, obviously, it's a good thing that we do have our freedom, but the counters, it's like with everything, you have to take the good with the bad. You have to take the bad bit that comes with the good. Yeah. Now, what I can't say for sure, or what I can't say 100% is whether I'll be happy to sacrifice that freedom that we have here in the West purely because of how some people are moving. Because
well, let me ask you. Sorry.
No, okay. Finish. So I was just gonna say because again, you're absolutely correct. How the emerging nations, the emerging sort of countries, China, Middle East, and all those have very core principles, very core ideas that they follow, come what may. But remember and that is good. But remember, with every good thing, there's also the bad thing. There's also the fact that, it's partly authoritarian in most regards. Like when I went, I'll tell you something. When I went to Hold on. But again, I know you're going to say, what does that mean?
Because the question is if it's authoritarian, and that's the problem. Look at us here who are not authoritarian states.
Yeah, but this is what I'm saying. So every which way you look at it, each one has its advantages and disadvantages. What I'm saying is, the question here is whether you're willing to accept the advantage that comes to the West and accommodate the negative side of it as well. Similarly, if you were to go to the Middle East, yes, you have the principle, the morals and stuff, but it comes to the fact that you probably don't have much of a say in other things. So it's almost like you have to pick and choose what you want. I'll give you an example. Sorry, just before you jump in, I'll just give you one example when we went to Dubai on honeymoon. So we got an Uber and we're heading back to our hotel. And we get to a traffic light. And this lady is on the traffic light. So the Uber driver gives him right of way, right? So she goes past and it's in her lane, right? So we come next to her and we're going. But as she's exiting, well, she's kind of exited, but she doesn't look and she comes and brushes against the Uber driver. Now, the Uber driver has done nothing wrong. He gave her right away. She went, she picked her lane. He chose the other lane and then she came. She literally got out. I think she was maybe like she was definitely an expat.
Yeah.
Maybe somewhere from Eastern Europe or something like that.
Yeah.
Sounded Russian, but I can't say for sure. And so when I saw it, like she came on, she's like, no, you messed up, you fucked up, da 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 da. So I just looked at her like, this woman is talking trash. So I told the Uber driver, okay, because we're literally like walking. Hello, can you hear me? Yeah. So we're literally like walking distance from the hotel, and we had something to go and do. So I told him, look, here's my number. We were in the car, we saw everything. She's claimed she's going to call police. Just give me a call when the police comes, and you have a witness. I can do this thing for you. Apparently, when the guy got to the police station, the policeman, first thing he did was listen to the expat. Yeah. That's what I said, this is what happened, ABC. The policeman turned to the guy and said, okay, case closed. You are in the wrong. You're paying a fine. It's like, you haven't even heard what I'm going to say. I even have a witness. It's like, if you speak anymore, I'm going to double the fine.
Yeah.
And that was it.
I know that.
So, yeah. So what I'm saying is there is the pros and cons. But anyway,
I think you've picked a very, forgive me,
of course, a very specific example.
It's a very extreme. You see, if let's keep life simple.
Okay.
Right now, see the way things are in England. As it stands, is this the type of society you want to raise your children in?
I prefer to go back home, as I've always said.
Okay, so no. Now, if you had the choice of raising them in a society like this, or a society at the very least, because what you're talking about is a very specific thing.
But hold on, I'm not using the example as account. I'm just using, because that example is obviously specific. But think that if that can happen, other things. There's other parts of.
But by the way, that could just as well happen here in the UK. It will masquerade itself very differently, though. Very differently. Very differently. Like, I mean, the same exact thing could happen. You know, I could be in the middle of I don't know, North Wales, for instance, which I was one time. And I have a car accident. And it might not be my fault. It might be somebody else's fault. But I live in a society which doesn't have a lot of black people and has a perspective of black people that is not good. Now, regardless, they might even know each other. They might just go and decide, this guy is at fault. And there's nothing I can do about it. It happens. Yeah. For God's sake, we're seeing every single day in New York, people, not every single day, but you see in New York, these are really extrajudicial killings by police officers of black men, Hispanic men. We're not talking about discrimination happens everywhere. So that discrimination of whether it's an expat, and I bet the driver was Pakistani or something like that, right?
No, it was actually just I don't know. Not Pakistani though.
He was Asia, black.
No, not Asian. He looked. Where was he from actually? I thought he was actually from the region. You know, I think he was a local.
So he's from the region. Okay, yeah. So either way.
But sorry. Just a quick point of this distinction here. So I get what you're saying, that this kind of thing can also happen in the UK. The difference here is that in the UK and presumably the West, if somebody says, you go to the police and they say, no, we're finding in favor of this person, they have to provide you with a reason. They have
Yeah.
to provide you. You have the right to say your piece, and there's due
type of
process.
thing. Yeah,
Exactly.
fair enough. Fair enough.
And this is where I think the West has the good things in
But
place.
you see, for me, the thing then becomes, if you don't like it, leave. You can leave. It's not as if you can't leave. If you don't like that, leave.
What
Do you understand
mean?
what I'm saying?
I don't like what?
You see, if that is the part of the society that makes you frustrated, then you can leave. It's not as if there's an iron curtain saying you cannot leave this country once you're here.
No,
You
but
have
if we're
freedom to leave.
debating,
But it's like,
the
it's no
benefits of
different
either
to-
one.
No. I'm talking. I'm trying to keep this very, very general. Like, if I say to you, come to my house. In my house, we don't eat meat.
Yeah.
You have a choice whether you want to come or not. You might not agree with it at all, but this is how we do things here, and we get things done. As opposed to your house, where it's like there's everything, and then you go, there's meat on the ceiling, there's pork on the floor, there's chicken. You're just like, okay, it's good to have everything, but pick a meal. What are we eating today? So the bottom line of what I'm trying to get at is, I'm not advocating that everybody should move to the Middle East because it's paradise.
No.
All I'm purely saying is, whether you like how they operate or not, from a moral standpoint, moralistic standpoint, quality of life standpoint, I think on every index, they supersede the UK as far as societal. Safety, like crime. And I would even argue respect for women. There's this whole concept of this part of the world doesn't respect women. No, they don't respect promiscuous people. They don't respect that sort of thing. But a woman is protected in the home, in the family. There's no way. In fact, I'm pretty sure that whole situation, because if you study the Quran, I'm pretty sure if you look in that situation when they were favoring the woman, if you say the guy was also kind of regional or whatever, they were favoring the woman because she's a woman, maybe. And again, I'm not saying that for our own people, by the way, because I've also heard horror stories of black women, because the status, when you don't have a passport, when you don't have a European passport in that part of the world, it's very difficult. They treat you very differently. They give you like something like 30 days to get out the country. You could have been living there 10, 15 years, so I'm not saying they don't have issues. Please, please, please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm purely saying that from a moral standpoint, because remember, we are children of immigrants. There's a reason why African people go to Ukraine despite all the things that they're going on. You don't hear Nigerians and African people who left Ukraine during when the war first started. You don't hear them complaining. You don't hear them complaining, because there's a thing here also in the West for us black people where we're reacting. 90% of the time we're in the reactive mode. 90% of the time.
Well, because it's not our home,
society. Like, children who grow up in this society are reactive. If you're a black person growing up, whether it's in America, where you are reacting to things as opposed to just being. Truly, the only place you can be close to being is back home. But there are places where, at the very least, they will not challenge your own personal morality, and the West will do it. You see, one black politician 10 years ago said this. Now they've changed completely because they know that it's changing with the tide. You understand? The tide is changing. Everybody's thinking like this. You have to be politically correct. So your morals go out the window. And things are changing at such an alarming rate that even all these things that we're all criticizing now, in 10 years, we might find ourselves, I beg, Shibi is okay now. You understand what I'm saying? You understand what I'm saying? So it's not about advocating for one place or another. It's just purely about saying, what is around in the Western world? Is this a place to raise children? Is this a society that is worth it? In the long run, will you lose more by being here than not? That you have to really think about it. Think about your cousins. In terms of just even their connection to home. Yes, they may have visited, but think about their connection in terms of mentally, how they think. Do they think Western or do they think African? So even from that point of view, I know what I'm doing. I've been spending money on my children to learn our language online, because I know this is the little I can do to keep them close to their culture by being in the West. But at some point in time, I'm going to look at my children. If I don't take drastic action and without telling the audience, You know the kind of actions I'm already taking with my kids.
Mm.
I know for a fact that if I don't take drastic action, I will look at my child at 18 or 25, at 30, and I'll say, Kai, I raised the European.
So I raised the European.
You know? So that's just let me just take a couple of messages.
Sure.
Just a couple of messages. Lizzie, my sister. My sister, when are you coming live? I'm annoyed though. You need to come on. It's give and take. In Arabia, you lose some freedom of speech, and there's racist occurrences there too. Absolutely. There's racism. They have their own racism. Make no mistake about it. We're simply talking about the overall moral point of view. But by the way, anyway, let me not even go. Let me not advocate too much before people start saying something else. I hear, okay, yeah, we've see again, this new politics is not sitting well with a lot of folks. The question is this also, think about it. 10, 15 years ago, the politics of that time, we didn't like it. But somehow we all like, you know what? Let's just take it. 2016, when they brought gay marriage into the thing, most people, it was still a fight. It was a fight. Even when you go 20, 30 years before that, like open homosexuality, right, wasn't allowed. But gradually, everybody starts accepting it. Now, if you want to be gay, there's nothing wrong with that. But I don't understand why the world has to transform for what you do in your bedroom. They call homosexuality a civil rights. Now, I don't mind what terminology you try and use, but if you equate that to the civil rights of human beings that were denied access simply because of the way they looked, for God's sake, you can throw a gay man in a crowd full of black people and you will not know who is gay, but you will see all the black people. You understand what I'm saying? We're not talking about something which has something to do with your image. We're talking about you're equating it to something that has seen millions of people enslaved, castrated, raped, and murdered. Think about that. We're calling that a civil right. Now they've gone and made LGBTQ, whatever, right? They've even gone and taken the people who were just saying, look, give me my rights as a homosexual. They've now gone and included them with all the other ones who have said, I identify as a man, I identify as a woman. They've now gone and grouped them together. So even that is discriminating against the gay people in that sense. You understand? So the thing is, this thing becomes limitless. And by the way, I don't really believe that whoever is pulling the strings behind this thing, I don't really think they care. And I think morally, they know what is right and what is wrong. Morally, but it is a game to them at this point. You know? Galactic Soul, good to see you. No, thank you. I would rather work with the chaos of the West than be subjected to the religious template of the Middle East or authoritarian regime of a China. Galactic Soul, I think you need to travel more, personally. I think it's and this is the thing, like we live in a society where we still believe the news that we hear about places. Like, we still believe it. Like what, I used to work with a guy who had never been anywhere before, never been on a plane, but argued and argued and argued about these different parts of the world, saying these places are this, these places are that. And I'm like, the only way you can ever find out about a place is to go there or to take eyewitness accounts of people, a nuanced eyewitness account. Because again, take the West. If I use the media to explain to me how America is, I would say, America. Now, if I made it specific and said, let me use the news to explain to me what a Black American is. Oh my God. Oh my God. Imagine me trusting what TV told me about Black America. You understand what I'm saying? This is what I mean about the education that we're given. It's not only that it's so regional, it's also it doesn't even allow you to think about any other possibility of the world, But thank you very much. PJ, freedom for suppression or freedom of liberation? It's your choice. Freedom for suppression or freedom of liberation. I kind of like that. It's your choice. I kind of like, and that's really the choice that we all have. You know, I'm not enamored by the West. More and more Americans are leaving the US for South America. Not just South America. More, they're leaving for Africa too, and I talk about that a lot on the show. They're leaving for Africa. They're also leaving for Asia and so on. But I would argue, actually, because all these places that they're leaving to, even South America is still considered a third world country, a third world region of the world, right? You have Brazil, which is part of BRICS, but the rest of the place is really as bad, if not worse, than Africa in terms of economics and political strife, etc. But people still feel that they can go to places there. Southeast Asia, same thing. I have a friend that just moved to Vietnam. For God's sake, Vietnam 40 years ago, 50 years ago was fighting a war, which really they haven't fully recovered from. But people are still going there to live, despite all the issues. So I'm saying if we can go to places like this, which outwardly don't have a great reputation, why is it that we quickly dismiss the West and dismiss the so-called Middle East and the Arab states? It's purely because the West recognizes this is our main competitor. They are vastly taking over the resources, buying up a lot of the resources, buying up a lot of the industry that exists in the Western world. They are a major competitor. Don't forget Boris Johnson. As soon as we came out of the pandemic and then you had the war with Ukraine, where did he run to go and get oil? Saudi. He go on the knees and beg the Saudis. You know, we take all their moral stuff out the window. Let's focus on the morals of the West. What have they done? What have they done and continue to do? We're still facing Iraq war. The displacement of millions, the destruction, destabilizing of how many generations? We are still facing that what no one is talking about what the West does. But these people, the women cover themselves. Okay, what's the state of our women here in the West? What's the state of marriage, divorce rates? But we want to criticize them because we don't like it. Haba.
I've got a question. When you finish reading the comments, I've got a question I want to.
I stopped going to Europe. I don't blame you. Go to other parts of West Africa too, my dear. Yeah, okay, Kofi, finish. I think that's the last one.
Yeah.
Chuku Igwe, I missed this one. Salute to you, Chuku. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was gonna ask, what do you? The broader question is, what do you think is the cause of, as you put it, the lack of morality in the West? And do you think that free markets plays a big part in that?
Well, let's put it to you this way. Let's just take, so free markets is obviously a starting point from an economic point of view, because in fact, when you talk about like socialism and capitalism, you know, this is another area I studied a lot, especially for university. That was pretty much my degree. The degree I didn't finish. But anyway, the communism and socialism, in theory, we're more in line with something that we as African people and pretty much most of the world accepted. This whole idea of it's not just about me. In my place, for example, we have a saying, you're not a rich man unless your people are rich too. Right? This whole idea of, you know, started from the bottom, now my whole team's here. That type of that concept is very, it's not just African, it's worldly. The hunter-gatherer, even in the Caucasus Mountains, will go out, hunt, kill the bear, bring it back, give it to his wife. She will find a way to preserve the meat for a few weeks, for a few months. They will eat from it. He will go out, hunt, come back, and so on. If he dies, she will go and find another husband to join as part of his own family, right? So the idea of community has always been a human thing. The problem is once you start saying freedom of market, in other words, let me be selfish. Let me move away from a socialist point of view. Let me start focusing on a capitalistic. In other words, if you're stupid enough to buy my lie to you that about your land, I will not only take your land, but I will enslave you in the process. You're stupid for it. You understand what I'm saying?
Okay.
You understand what I'm saying? That is the capitalistic mindset. It says, okay, no, I can do whatever I want because there are no rules. They look in football, for example, there was this whole idea, this thing about the Super League. I don't know if you remember this Super League thing where they were going to get the 20 best teams in Europe and put them all in one football league.
Yeah.
Just like how they have the NBA and everything. There's no relegation. Those guys stay there. Fans went and protested. Okay, no problem. Let it die out. The conversation's back up. And I bet you in the next 5-10 years, we'll see it happen. Simply because the selfish interests of a few, especially when they have access to the wealth, will always trump the masses. Now, what happens when you have a society where everyone thinks selfishly? You have high divorce rates, high single parents, families. You have one person saying, today I'm a dog, next day I'm a man, next day I'm a woman. Because it's all about me. The collective means absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Imagine me saying to myself, my children are going to be on their own anyway. They're going to be adults on their own. Why do I care how they live their life? Just as long as they're happy. Isn't that the most selfish thing you as a parent can say to your children? These are people that came into this world and are clueless. Even at 18, they're clueless. But you're saying to them at, what is the age now in the UK? 13 years old, that if you feel you identify as you're a boy, but you want to be a girl, you can do that. If you can say that to a 13-year-old, then what you're basically saying in a nutshell, my brother, is I don't care. I'm selfish. I'm focused on me. You focus on you, 13-year-old. So it's not just the free market economy starts the mental part. Sorry, the outward part, right? And then it seeps into the interior part, right? You know, without making this about our Muslims or anything either, but in Islam, you know, in Christianity, for instance, you have the whole concept of the tithe. 10% of your income goes. That's a socialist point of view. But what happens when Christianity isn't important? The tithes go out the window. Don't forget, church land in most parts of the westernized world are tax-free. In other words, they get given to the churches because it is seen as something which serves the best interest of the community. But when people aren't going to the churches anymore, when people aren't even believing in the churches, and when the churches too are changing the rules, Whereas, again, without making this about Islam, you go to the Middle Eastern parts, this whole idea of 5 times a day, get your ass on your knees and pray. The way Islamic cities were initially designed, they have everything is centered around what they call the masjid, the mosque. That around the mosque is the souk, the marketplace. And then outside of that is the cemetery. In other words, saying that the center of all your life is in the where you pray. Because on the exterior of that is death. So it doesn't matter. As soon as the Adnan, this thing they call the prayer, the call to prayer happens, people drop everything they're doing and go in and pray. Now, I'm not trying to make this, again, I'm not advocating for everybody to go and become a Muslim. But in a world where we are so selfish, where we only think of ourselves, what is so wrong about a time of day where we say, no, let's go and give it up to the Creator? Let's not focus on ourselves. But when you have a lack of God in this society, and it doesn't matter what God you believe in, to me, it's not really about that. It's just even recognizing that there is something supreme that controls this earth. It's not just us, but we. Even if you don't believe in God, even if you just say, okay, let me believe in the power of the collective, the Big Bang, at least it will give you some sense of it's not just about me, it's about the society. When did this world become about me? Imagine you living your generation as if that is all that matters. You're not even a second in human history. How can you be that important? How can people make the decision to say, oh no, I don't want to have children? No children for me. Cuss it out like it's something. And the ones that do have children say, oh, I'm going to have children in such a circumstance that's going to make those children have less of a chance of success in life. This is so selfish, because what are you doing? You're setting generations up for failure. Do you understand what I'm saying, Kofi?
I understand what you're saying.
So when you bring it back to the original point and the original question, which is life in the West conducive to raising children? No, it's not. And if Africa is not on the cards yet, I think it will be. But if Africa is not on the cards yet, surely in the short term, Kofi, you haven't started having children yet, but you will start soon. And the world that you will bring them into in the Western world, you really have to analyze and say, okay, am I okay with the consequences? God forbid anything happens to me today. Are they in the right place that I can at least trust that this society will steer them roughly in the direction I want them to? I'm sorry, my brother. You don't have to answer for me. I know it's a big fat no.
Let me ask something. So what do you think is a redeemable quality of the West then? Do you think, first of all, do you think it's redeemable? Or do you think it's redeemable? Yes or no? And then if so.
My brother, I don't believe there's anything redeem. See, human beings, absolute power corrupts absolutely. It might be that power moves to, say, the Middle East, and it's there for 100 years. In another 200 years, people will be like, this place has this society is so bad. Because human beings have this habit of, when they're in absolute control, and without being like moral, the only civilizations that have lasted thousands of years at the pinnacle are African-led societies. That's the truth. Whether it's ancient Egypt, Kush and Meroe, whether it's places in Mali, Songhai. Okay, obviously they didn't conquer major regions, but they were the powerhouses of the world at that time. All the way to even when the black people went, the Moors went to Spain and Portugal and south of France. 800 years, bro. But everybody else, Greeks, Romans, all these different people. China obviously had their own thing. In fact, let me include China too. Let me include China too, actually. Because China they did their thing over there.
Oh, so are you saying the African dynasties were longer than the Greek?
Not just dynasties, but African civilizations when they were at the pinnacle, right? You just take ancient Egypt, right? Plug. Take ancient Egypt, for example. There were whole periods where they lost power completely and they weren't what they used to be. But there is at least thousands of years, conservatively, by the way, of history where they were the Don Dada of that region they call so-called Middle East and that part of Africa. It's a bit like how you had in 1945, Britain was a major powerhouse. So was America. So was France. You understand? But also so was the Soviet Union. You understand? Very different ideologies, but they were Egypt at the same time. There was people in Persia were still pretty powerful. Alexander, don't forget, had to come all the way to Africa and then go all the way to India to fight, to try and see who is better, Greeks or these people, And then, of course, he died, and that didn't last long. 200-300 years later, somebody else took over. So anyway, the point I'm making is, from a societal point of view, human beings always have a way of taking things too far. But there is no doubt it's only societies that said, let's be free, that things start becoming very, very confusing. Look, the Greeks, Plato, you know what Plato said? Plato said the only real relationship a man should have is with a young boy. This is what that's what they call a platonic relationship. Male and female relationship is platonic. In other words, male and females are not supposed to be sexually. So to him, young boys, this is what he said.
No, but is that where platonic relationship comes from?
That's where platonic comes from. That's what he said. But you don't go to Greece and go to anywhere that the Greeks touched. You see everything that we're talking about that's going on right now. At least you see the roots of it there. all these things that we're talking about. So it's Western freedoms always lead to this sort of problem. Always. That's just history. Yes, there are all these like democracy or democracy, if you want to call it that.
No.
Because the truth is, Kofi, who is to say? Let me say something to you. I watched the coronation, and I know this might seem like, for those of you who know me very well, I watched the coronation not because, and I sat there with my oldest son. I said, "Watch this." You know why? Because what you're seeing is the maintenance of a culture. Do you know how the Asante Hene his coronation? Do you know the procedure? Have you ever seen it happen, Kofi?
Mm-mm. No.
You understand what I'm saying? So you don't even know. I'm like, these people at least have maintained the culture. They said this is the throne that in 1066, this is the throne that this was made 1,000 years ago. It's maintenance of a culture. Now, there's a reason why, whether you like them or not, there's a reason why the monarchy in the UK is still celebrated and still allowed to be maintained. Because it pales, because the democracy that is here pales in comparison to legacy of culture. These people may be atheists, but they will always go to church because that is part of some sort of moral conditioning of their monarchs. Whereas I can say I'm a prime minister.
They also get the monarchs get supposedly their power from God, so they have no choice but to go to church. No?
But you see, all these things, it's mythology. All religion is mythology, by the way. Even the way monarchs are given their power. I mean, you watch my documentary, Dahomey of Vodun. The Dahomey people said that it's a girl mated with a panther by the river, and that's how the Dahomey people. So it's not so important about. It's just about the maintenance of culture. Why? Not why it started, but the maintenance of culture. You know. Whereas democracy is one which, my brother, go to Africa, tell them democracy. We've just had non-stop changing of power in Nigeria since 1999. You people in Ghana, same thing since 1999. Changing of power. How good is life for you? How good? Even in this UK, I just renewed my car insurance. Almost a decade of no claims. No, let me tell you, almost a decade of no claims. I've paid the equivalent. What I paid the last 4 years together is what I paid in 1 year.
Fuck, you know. So excuse me, you're joking. Why?
I'm telling you. I don't know. You tell me. They say cost of living crisis. What I paid for 4 or 5 years worth of power, electricity and gas, my brother, I paid 1 year this year. I say, this is the democracy. This is the democracy. Whereas, again, UAE, when you get married, they give you a home. If you're a local, they give you a home. They give you money to start your life with. Not because they're a democratic place, but it's in line with their religion. You see, we have to be open-minded. This close-minded thing doesn't get us anywhere. Why are we so focused on trying to find faults and trying to find benefits in the place that everybody knows has failed? There's no black person that, especially in America, who can really look at what the West has done for their people and say the West it's not even worth exploring anything else. And by the way, my number one advocacy is our people back home. But all I'm saying is, by the time we get to the time when it's our turn, we will be so westernized that our time it might even fly over us. We won't even know we have it because we're so busy trying to be westernized.
Yeah, no, that one I think is arguably already happened, man. I think it may have happened because that's one of the reasons for at least in my case, trying to push to go sooner rather than later. Because I know many family members that end up going, or actually they don't end up going because they've just been here for too long and they cannot even live there or adapt there.
Acclimatize, absolutely, and that's part of the problem. On this channel, I'm trying to organize the first trip, and I'm trying to get people to go to Africa for the first time. You see, you know, like trying to get people out of their comfort zone, as bad as it is, trying to get people out of their comfort zone is almost impossible. They will rather stay here and complain. This is why I keep saying to you, in the West, we are reactive. Everything's a reaction. And it's not just black people. It's everybody. This one is reacting to this. Oh, so are you homophobic? Oh, are you racist? Oh, are you this? Everybody is reacting. It's a reactive society. You understand? You're not actually allowed to be free. Whereas, I'll actually say this to you. A country or a society where there are parameters about what is morally right or wrong allow one to think logically and for the benefit of and in their long-term best interest. Here there's no logic. Or no, not that there's no logic, but logic is fast, quickly leaving. Logic is, you saw the what is a woman thing. Logic is leaving, my brother. Yeah. Logic is everything is subjective. So if logic is leaving, what are you left with? But at least you go to a society where logic is still there. And the reason why I said Middle East, my brother, I know it sounds like I'm promoting it.
Didn't they sign you up to a tourism
company? My brother, back home, the major cities, these urbanized versions of Africa, Kinshasa, Lagos, Accra, Cotonou, Abidjan, Dar es Salaam, Nairobi, we are desperately trying to emulate the West. Let me go back to my point I made earlier. If I used what I saw on TV to see Black America, and then I chose to push what I saw about Black America as the mainstream world culture, what does that really do for me in the end? But try to make me a carbon copy of a people who unfortunately, the same people who we are advocating for have done the worst injustices to. Think about it. These are the people you've done the worst injustices to. But you've gone and taken the worst of them and put them on Love and Hip Hop. Put them on, what's the other one? Marriage Boot Camp, or whatever they call that show. What's the show again? You're going to take the worst of them and put them there for the world to see. Something happens on the news, you go and bring Cardi B to explain it. Cardi B? Cardi B, come and explain to us why Obama lost the election. And then a small girl in Lagos, Kinshasa, Accra is watching her. Oh my God. Next thing she's snapping her lips and snapping her fingers and trying to be Cardi B. Haba. Or a guy is seeing a big. Do you remember our age? Do you remember when his uncle used to come to your house? The young uncle that was 40, 38, 40, that kind of age. He used to come to your house. He's the young uncle, but he's still a man, respectable. He will give you small money when he's leaving. Take care of yourself. Listen to your parents. It doesn't give you many messages. Just take care of yourself. Listen to your parents.
He doesn't give you many messages.
But now, the men of that age are they're in the club, bro. They are going to Afro Nation.
This guy, don't put us in this. No, listen, those uncles also went to do their own shit, I get your point. So by the way, the reason why this is funny is because we are going to Afro Nation. So when the uncles are in the club,
we are the uncles that's supposed to be. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not even trying to make it seem like I just feel, excuse me, I just think we need to start as we say back home, respecting ourselves a bit more. That's all. Kofi, just before you say anything, let me just read. Kind of flies, that's ridiculous. Society doesn't care about the individual, but the society. Sorry, society doesn't care about the individual, but the society. This means a loss for the individual for the benefit of the society. I kind of think I know what you mean there. Chukwu Igwe There's still money to be made in the West. America is a corporation and the business capital of the world. The American dollar is like vibranium and it's still the global reserve currency. I like that point because this is
potentially not for long though, because the BRICS are trying to.
It's still the biggest economy at the moment.
Oh, for
but
sure.
But Chuku made a good point because it just speaks to the nuance of the conversation that we're having. No one is saying don't come to the West. I've always said this. I said, look, if you need to make money, you can come here and hustle. This is a place to hustle. It's not a place to settle. Come hustle, bounce. If it means you buying as many houses as possible, making as much money, sending it home, sending it up, it's still a place to hustle. At the end of the day, where you have the dollar, where you have the pound, where you have the euro, no one is saying don't play the economic game because that's the only way you get by in this world. I'm simply saying, from a moral standpoint, is this the society that people really want to? And by the way, even the way people are moving to places like Dubai and Doha, and I'm talking about Instagram influencers, online celebrities. They're incentivizing these people to move over, but they're not giving them the opportunity to become citizens. These people are smart. If we thought like that in Africa, my brother, will be further along. We said to people, okay, you know what? English people, come. We'll pay you your salary, build this country. But as soon as you do 1 year, you're gone. We'll bring another person back until my society is sorted. That's how you do things. But we in Africa, did you see the BS that we did in Nigeria with Nigeria Airways, with Ethiopia? We went and got an Ethiopian airline, put a sticker on top of it, said it was Nigeria Air, one plane. And the plane still flies as Ethiopian Airlines, gave Ethiopian Airlines 49% share. It was one of the biggest scams. Just happened a few weeks ago. We do things so badly sometimes. 70% of all searches are made in English. Okay? We laugh, but fighting the stereotypes is draining, and these images are broadcasted worldwide. Shake my head. Lizzie, my sister, isn't that what I'm talking about? They will take the worst of the worst. And by the way, they are doing it with our people in Africa too. Don't get it twisted. Don't. My brother. They will take the worst of the worst and go and put them on Front Street and say, everybody, look at this. Look at Kofi, have you ever gone and read chats sometimes? Or like just comment section, just see how people speak. I'm like, okay, fine. English is not. You see, if you're going to speak a language, speak it well. You can't say, oh, it's not my natural language, but it's the only language you speak, so speak it well. But you can't. We have reached a place where nothing matters. Nothing matters as long as my truth. Can you imagine telling your grandfather in the village, oh, grandpa, this is my truth. I don't want to go to the farm today. It's my truth. You will starve there. You will starve. Because we don't see the benefit of the global, the wider society.
Actually, sorry, you finish the comment and then I'll ask a question.
Okay, Chuku, I think you're missing my point. Sorry, can I just say this last one? So there are communities of West Africans in the US and the UK that still build strong families and maintain. My brother, the society that you raise your children in, you might have roots somewhere else. If it's all about economics, focus on that, no problem. I'm talking about the morals that society has. Those children may have wealth, but do they have those ethnic traditions? What is an ethnic tradition? An ethnic tradition is what? And what is the importance of an ethnic tradition? It's not just so it's a tokenistic thing that you do. It's something which has to be part of your way of life. Kofi, did you know what to do before you got married to your wife? Did you know what to do?
Well, in terms of my obligations and responsibilities,
what you have to do as a Ashanti man.
Yeah.
When did you learn how to do it, Kofi?
Good question. I don't think there's a specific time. It was just through growing up from home.
Okay, You grew up in Africa. Yeah. Now, if you ask any of your cousins now, let's say they weren't privy to the information that you had. I'm sorry, they weren't aware of the procedure.
Yeah.
If you ask them on the spot, what's the procedure for a man to go and marry a woman? How many of them do you think will know?
Oh, you mean in terms of like the, the parents and the knocking and things like that.
This is the importance of it. It only works if it's a way of life. You knew it simply because you saw it happen. No one had to teach you. But we are at a point now where you can talk about it. You can put a Nollywood movie on and see how these things are done. But ultimately, you need to experience something to be part of it. Now, fine, that's not always going to be possible because we live in the West. But I'm saying to you, the values that you're actually getting from the West, do they take you even further away from the things that you're supposed to be doing in your own culture? You understand? I would argue that Western culture is a bastardized version of every great civilization that's ever existed. It's the most bastardized version. Because what you're saying is all those civilizations, cultures that exist, which said, you know what? We don't judge anybody. It's been taken to a far, 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 far more dangerous extreme, which is not only do we not judge anyone, but you can do whatever you like. Do whatever you like. You understand? Anyway, so that's me.
You got it? Okay. So my final question, I guess, on this topic is, is there a risk that in the same way that you spoke of how, the West are put on Main Street and they're given this platform and it's shown, across the world. And so the perception of Black America is, Cardi B and them lot.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a risk that the excess freedom, the whole cis men, women, all of those things, do you think that there's a similar thing happening in that regard? Because sometimes, particularly social media, I feel like we sometimes live in our own echo chambers. Well, not echo chambers, but we live in a bubble.
Agreed.
And so once we see the same things repeatedly, we get the perception that this is prevalent. Because if you just try and think about it logically, in terms of percentages, you cannot think that more than even 2% of the world's population want to switch genders and things like that.
No, of course not.
So that would, given that is the minority.
Yeah, but you said the world's population.
Sorry, but even let's say even America, for example. Let's say even America. I think it's logical to say that it's in the minority. Now, I get the fact that
to switch. It's not about wanting to switch. It's about accepting that that's okay.
Yes, but even the acceptance of it, because again, we're speaking almost, and I know it's probably trending that way, but we're speaking almost as if this the acceptance has happened all across America. I don't think it has. And I don't think for the most part, I think most people are either against it or not even aware of it. It's not even on their radar for the most part.
But irrespective of that, I think once legislation is passed, whether it's federally or on the state level, enough people have a vested interest in making sure it happens. You see, we cannot plead ignorance. We cannot plead ignorance. Let's say, for example, let's take transatlantic slave trade. There were people who were like, man, this shit is, when they really see it, they're like, man, this thing is messed up. This thing is bad. Look how they're treating people. But I'm not going to say anything. So by being passive, you're complicit. You and I are protesting this thing, but it doesn't matter. Because these people have passed the rule at 13 years old, you can change genders. We can't change that. So it's not about has nothing actually to do with the individual it has everything to do with the fact that you are a passive member of the society. You are a passive, and that's.
But okay, so do you know the number of states that have actually implemented this law?
You're talking about America. Focus on the UK. You're asking me too many questions.
In the UK.
Either way.
Because I think the ultimate point I'm trying to make is this. obviously the core question is whether the West is sort of floundering in terms of morality, and a big part of that is how things are going with where there's no sort of, for lack of a better word, discipline or morality in terms of, or even logic in terms of
Yeah.
things that we believed 10 years ago, 20 years ago that just being pulverized. But I guess my question is there a risk that we are over egging the situation? Because as much as the law has been passed, that does not mean that A, the majority of people believe it, that B is being actually used that much. I
Mhm.
mean, fair enough, we see a lot of it on social media because we follow liberal news channels and things like that, most likely. Because the conservatives, if they show it, they're probably bashing it as well. At least, again, this is more the US than the UK.
But
UK,
but
I
but
think I
but,
haven't even heard
but
much about it.
but at the same time, don't take for granted the power of social media. I mean, Facebook bought Instagram for billions. Most people have access to social media. Don't be fooled.
No, no, I get that. I get that.
Most people spend 30 minutes. I don't know what the statistics are. Will spend a
More than
specific.
30 minutes.
No, I'm just saying across the population. Let's just say like every age group, every race, every whatever. Let's
Mm.
People get a lot of their information through Twitter, Facebook, Instagram,
Yeah, that's
not
wild.
the news. But if the news is also saying what the social media people are saying, then it doesn't really matter whether or not you buy into it. You're consuming so much of it that after a while, it just becomes normal.
No, I don't think. Well, okay. So I think this is where it differs in terms of age groups, because you're right. The social media aspect obviously targets more the younger generation.
I doubt it, though.
Obviously,
I
no,
doubt
but
it.
hold on, hold on. No,
I,
but when I say
I,
targets,
I
hold on,
think, I
just one
think,
second.
okay.
So when I say targets, because when at our age, when we see something, we can look at it and analyze it, and be like, okay, nah, this is bullshit, or we
Take
don't
your
agree with it,
take,
whatever,
take
whatever.
your African upbringing out of it. Do you think you
Mhm.
have that sort of nuanced point of view? Because this is a society where nuance doesn't exist. As much as they like to tell you it does, if
No,
you
no.
grew up here, and I'm not bashing people that grew up in the UK, but if you grew up here in this society, which has
Mhm.
been ever changing, it's not a society that
I'll
it's
disagree with
constantly
that, to be
changing.
honest.
I don't believe you
I'll
will.
disagree with that because again, sorry, I should
Or
have
rather, I
probably
think
let you finish your point.
the likelihood of you um, um, being the same will just not be the case. The likelihood. So maybe you might, but in general,
Yeah.
no, not in
No, no,
this society.
I get that people will evolve. I guess the point that I'm trying to make is this: because you were sort of alluding to the point that with social media, you sort of get captured by this information, and then slowly that changes you because that's just society we live in. I think that is more prevalent when you are younger and have that sort of malleable mentality where you kind of take things in and take it as almost as gospel. But as you get older, I think you naturally question things a lot. I know I have cousins that
Yeah, I agree
have
with
lived
that.
born and bred here. So if they see something, the automatic thing is not to just take
I
it
I
as
I, I,
as
I agree. I agree with you.
they,
I
they might
agree.
not be able to do anything about it, but
No, no,
they would look at it and be like,
I,
nah, this is bullshit. Da,
I
da, da, da.
completely agree with you. But there's a point I made not long ago where I was talking about people our age 20, 30 years ago versus people our age now. I would
Yeah.
argue that people our age now mentally are far younger than people who had to work, who didn't have time to think about. That's just because life has become a little bit easier overall that you can
Mhm.
afford to take an extra 30 minutes to do this. You can afford to be an entrepreneur. You can, so I think in general, mentally, we're all significantly younger. When they say 30 is the new 20, it is. It is. Both from a health perspective, because of the access to information and good food, etc., but also from a growth perspective. I'm sorry, my brother, without mentioning names, I know 40-year-olds that I'm like, you're too stupid. You're stupid.
I know
You
a few
see,
as well.
once you take common sense out, because we're not saying not everybody has to be a rocket scientist, but take common sense out where somebody is unable to have, and I talked about this earlier, logic. Isn't it grown men that's professors that are telling you a man can have a baby? I mean, come on. 50-year-old men are telling you that. That is an absence of logic. So I would actually argue that yes, social media may target young people, but I would argue that everybody is mentally young. Everybody. I was having a conversation with my wife. I was like, because my son's about to go to school. I'm like, we really need to think about how we need to start pulling off some pictures that we may have put up on our social media accounts. She's like, oh, why? I was like, those kids, his friends are going to see those things. You don't want to put him in a position where he has to start answering for his parents. I'm like, because think about it. We didn't know diddly squat of what our parents did unless they told us about it.
Mm.
Now a child has to all of a sudden answer to the fact that his mom is on OnlyFans, that his mom is on social media showing her ass twerking. His dad is in the club at 4 a.m. while he's in school. His dad is, it's logic. Let me think in the best interest of not just me, but my lineage. That's why I call this, I like this podcast because men talk too. But I said this to a friend of mine. I'm attracted now, to fathers. People who take the job of fatherhood seriously. Those are the kind of people that I like, especially of late. Those are the people that I tend to spend most of my time with.
Mm.
People who respect what being a father is. Because my brother, even forget the mothers, being a father has become something that certainly when you look at it from the point of view of how things used to be, where it was just something you did and you did it to the best of your ability. Now it's become something where it's like, as long as my child is happy. So now it takes people like us who want to be fathers, who respect being fathers, saying, no, we're going to be deliberate about everything we do. It's not easy for me to spend money sending my kids to Africa every so often. It's not easy even sending them to boarding school. It's not easy paying for these lessons for them to learn the language and then trying to make the time so you could do it. It's not easy doing all these things, but you have to be deliberate.
Mm.
You have to. Because if you're not deliberate, my brother, this society will take over. And by the way, you could be deliberate and it will still take over. Anyway.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Tim. A bit depressing, but
I don't think it is. I think I heard this quote actually recently. I said, those who take the time to raise their kids will find that their children in the future will have no competition whatsoever.
no. When I say depressed, I don't mean taking care of the kids. I mean the fact that, as you said, even with the fathers that are dedicated and deliberate,
that part is depressing.
that can
But
still,
that part is depressing. But what I'm saying is overall, on
no,
balance of probabilities, those people who raise their children to be as they should, as every generation has done before, their children will have no competition because they're a bunch of bitch asses, excuse my French, who are walking around here, fatherless men who are boys, who are really useless, really. And even when you talk about this whole, lions and tigers, people like to talk about we forget the women using queens, but men are using this phrase king all the time, and I'm just like, lion. I'm like, don't claim lion, my brother.
No, people I haven't even heard that one yet.
People call themselves lion. People, or at least people used to try to use the adopt, at least in a sense of adopting the characteristics. People put lion tattoos, lion this, like in some way, lion is a thing that people in this generation like to use a lot, both men and women. And the truth is, my brother, a lion is thinking constantly about his family. He's not a troublemaker at all. You know who the troublemaker is in the cat family? It's the tiger. The tiger is a solo animal, only thinks of himself. So you have a bunch of guys on social media and all these various places, all these big personalities who claim to be lions. They're tigers. A lion is a guy like me who sat down minding my business, going to the gym every day to get strong, just in case. He's not out there looking for trouble. I'm not an outspoken guy. I don't look for trouble. I mind my business. You understand? That is the lion. I focus on my what you know, and I'm not bigging myself up for no reason, but it's true.
No, you're focusing
on what is in the best interest of not just me, but my people. You see, my father didn't name me by accident. Onuora means Onu is mouth, Ora is people, mouth of the people. He gave me a name for a reason. So my job is to ensure that first of all, I take care of my children, then I take care of my society, my culture. At least I do my part. That's a lion. But you have guys who are like, oh, go and be the best you can be, go and make money, screw all these girls. And people will go and follow these podcasts and all these things and stick and swear by them. But they're teaching men to be tigers, teaching men to be selfish. Settle down, get married. Get married, build a home, build a family. Because it's not about you. You will die. Me and you will die. We will be dead. And then what happens next? It's not so much, it's not that important that I was famous. It's more important that my children were able to have a life that and they had enough values to help them create more life. That's all that matters. We're not even a millisecond in the grand scheme of our lineage of our families. We're not even a millisecond. Have you ever seen all these history shows where they see somebody's family tree? They say, this person is so grandfather, as if the person was just one dot. But the truth is that person had a whole lifespan. Probably while he was living it, thought he was super important. Truth is, we're not that important in the grand scheme of things. But we act like, and this is the problem with this society, we think we are so much better than anybody that's ever lived before. And I can't stand it. And that's a Western thing. Because you go to a lot of these other places, people don't really, there's no false sense of superiority. It's just, I'm me day here. I'm just, I'm just me.
Okay.
Last comment, I think Chukwuigwe hit the nail on the head. The West has been captured by various secular religions because it has turned its back on God, the importance of family. That right there is summary of our entire conversation. So, Kay, where can we find you?
You can't. I only pop up when I only pop up when I want to. You can't find me. You can find me on here though. Men talk too, innit?
We'll be back though, right? We'll be back again. I think we're gonna be regular, B, with this.
We you see how Onuora is saying this and looking at me. So I'm always the one causing issues. Are we going to do one Afro Nation next week?
We'll do one Afro Nation.
Are we going to do Uncle's Coming Afro Nation next week?
I see this purple. We'll do, in fact, we will do one. We'll do Afro Nation.
Because the other uncles will be there, so we can get them involved as well.
Like, those ones are not uncles.
They are now.
Those ones are grandfathers. Those ones are they're in the, you see what I mean? You see what I mean? Tigers are lions.
Relax. No.
They're looking for the lioness.
They're trying to find the lioness.
They're looking for the lioness. Fair enough. No problem. But yeah, we'll do another one live next week. God knows what state we'll be in.
Jesus Christ.
When are we leaving, by the way?
Tuesday.
And we come back.
You've not paid. We come back Sunday. You're the one trying to come back on Saturday, but
I got it. We're actually gone for a long time.
Yeah, pretty much a week. I wish we had even gone on a Monday.
3 days. Oh Lord. Yeah. Okay. Pray for me. Yeah. Anyway, my people, thank you so much for tuning in. Lizzie, Chukwuigwe, it's good to see you. I don't think I've seen you before. PJ, Galactic Soul, Modine, and whoever everybody else is gonna watch. These things are gonna be uploaded onto Apple Podcast as well as Spotify, so you'll be able to check it out there. I am Onuora Boa.
I am Hedy 28.
And we thank you very much for watching. Peace, 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 peace.